On that rainy afternoon, the busy lobby was filled with the usual sounds: clicking shoes, ringing phones, and voices that echoed across the tall glass walls. People were rushing in and out, all carrying their own worries and tasks. Among them stood a man in his late 40s, dressed neatly in a dark suit. He was the CEO of one of the city's largest companies. To the outside world, he looked complete, powerful, respected, and wealthy. But behind the polished surface, he carried a quiet emptiness. His days were filled with meetings and his nights were spent alone in a big, silent apartment. As he walked through the lobby that day, checking messages on his phone, something unusual happened. A small tug at his sleeve stopped him in his tracks. Surprised, he looked down and saw a little girl, no older than 6 or 7. Her big eyes stared up at him with a mixture of innocence and hope. She wore a pink jacket, a little worn at the sleeves, and clutched a small stuffed bear that looked like it had been loved for years. In a soft voice that cut through the noise of the building, she said words that would stay with him forever: "I don't have a papa. Can you be my daddy forever?" For a moment, the CEO froze. His phone slipped slightly in his hand, and he almost forgot where he was. No one had ever spoken to him like that before, not with such honesty, not with such need. The child's words touched a wound deep inside him, one he had carefully hidden from the world. Years ago, he had lost the chance to have his own family. A broken engagement, choices made for business instead of love, and the loss of his father long ago had left him feeling as if some doors in his life had closed forever. The girl's innocent request felt like a mirror to his loneliness. He knelt down to her level, looking into her hopeful face. His voice, usually strong in boardrooms, came out quieter than he expected. "Where is your mama, little one?" The girl shrugged and hugged her bear closer. "Mama is working. She said someone would come for me, but they didn't." Around them, a few staff members began to notice. A security guard walked over carefully, not wanting to scare the child, and a receptionist made a few calls to check if anyone was missing a little girl. But the girl clung to the CEO's sleeve as if she trusted him above everyone else. The man, who had spent his life building contracts and closing deals, felt something shift inside. He was used to solving problems with numbers and strategies, but this was different. This was a child, fragile and sincere, looking at him like he could fill the biggest gap in her world. He stayed with her, patiently waiting, even though his schedule was tight. He didn't rush away, as he might have done in the past. Instead, he asked her about her bear, about her favorite food, and she answered with the bright honesty that only children have. For those few minutes, the noise of the lobby faded, and it felt like it was just the two of them, an important man rediscovering the forgotten warmth of simple human connection. Soon, building staff confirmed that the girl's mother worked long shifts nearby and that the child had gotten lost while waiting for a neighbor who was supposed to pick her up. There was no danger, no drama, only a small accident of circumstance. Relief passed over the group of adults standing around. But for the CEO, this was no ordinary accident. When the girl's mother arrived, her face filled with worry and apology, she scooped the little one into her arms. She thanked the staff and the CEO repeatedly, explaining in rushed words how her schedule had kept her away and how she had little help with childcare. The CEO listened quietly, nodding. The little girl looked back at him from her mother's embrace. She smiled, lifted her hand, and waved. "Thank you, mister," she said. The CEO gave a small nod, but inside, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. That simple wave, that innocent smile, left a mark on his heart. He walked back into the rain outside, his polished shoes splashing in puddles, but this time he wasn't thinking about the stock reports waiting on his desk. He wasn't thinking about the next big deal. He was thinking about the words of a child who had looked at him with pure trust: "Can you be my daddy forever?" For the first time in a long time, the CEO felt his chest tighten with something more powerful than business ambition. He felt the weight of longing, the need for connection, and the echo of family he thought he had lost forever. That night, as he sat alone in his large apartment, the silence felt heavier than usual. The child's voice replayed in his mind, soft and unguarded. He couldn't shake it. A stranger's little girl had reached through all his walls with just one sentence. And though the world outside saw him as powerful and complete, only he knew the truth. Inside, he was just as lonely as the child who had tugged at his sleeve. He poured himself a glass of water, stood by the window overlooking the glowing city, and whispered almost to himself, "Why did that feel so much like home?" That moment became the beginning of something he did not yet understand. A story that started with a simple tug on a sleeve, a question from a child, and a lonely man realizing that maybe life still had room for love, family, and second chances. The next morning came with grey skies, but the memory of the little girl's words was brighter than anything else in the CEO's mind. He went through his usual morning routine: coffee, reading reports, scanning financial charts, but his thoughts were not on business. Every number blurred in front of him because the face of that small child kept appearing in his memory. The sound of her soft voice, asking him to be her daddy forever, had shaken something in him that he could not ignore. At first, he tried to reason with himself. It was only a chance encounter. She is safe with her mother now. I should let it go. But even as he said those words to himself, he knew they were empty. Something had shifted inside him, and for the first time in years, he felt the pull of responsibility beyond contracts and boardrooms. Later that afternoon, he returned to the same building lobby, almost without planning it. A quiet part of him hoped he might see the girl again. Instead, he met one of the staff who had helped the day before. Out of curiosity, and perhaps concern, he asked gently, "Do you know how that little girl is doing?" The receptionist smiled and said the girl was fine. But then her voice lowered. "Her mother has been struggling a lot. She works double shifts at the hospital, sometimes at night, and doesn't always have reliable childcare." Yesterday was not the first time there was confusion. The CEO nodded, feeling a weight of sympathy. He realized this was more than just a small accident. The family was living on the edge of exhaustion. He knew how dangerous that could be for a child, not in terms of neglect, but in terms of the stress it placed on both mother and daughter. He thanked the receptionist and walked away, but the thought lingered. Later, he made a few discreet calls, not as a CEO using power, but as a man wanting to help. He confirmed the mother's identity through public records and saw that she had no criminal issues, only a hard-working woman trying to keep her family together. He felt a quiet respect for her. In his world, people measured success by wealth and titles. But here was a woman fighting each day to provide safety and food for her daughter. That was a different kind of strength, one he admired. That evening, unable to rest, he stopped by a small grocery store. He filled a cart with essentials: milk, bread, fresh fruit, rice, and some treats for a child. But he did not want to embarrass the mother or make her feel less. So, instead of knocking at her door, he arranged for the grocery delivery to arrive anonymously with a simple note, "For a hard-working family. From a friend." Days passed, and the CEO tried to focus on work. But his heart had already begun to open in a way he had not expected. 1 week later, he was invited by a colleague to visit the community center where company employees sometimes volunteered. He rarely joined such events, but this time he agreed. Something inside told him he should go. When he arrived, he was surprised to see the same little girl sitting cross-legged on the floor, listening to a volunteer read a storybook to a group of children. Her eyes lit up as she turned and noticed him. She whispered something to the child next to her and then gave him the biggest smile, the kind of smile that makes time slow down. After the reading session ended, she ran up to him, her bear still clutched in her hand. "You came back, mister," she said happily. Without thinking, he bent down to greet her. She quickly pulled out a folded piece of paper from her jacket pocket. It was a drawing, 2 stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. Above them, in uneven letters, were the words, "Thank you for finding us." The CEO felt his throat tighten. It was such a small piece of paper, but it carried more meaning than any award he had ever received. He carefully tucked it into his pocket like it was something priceless. The center's coordinator noticed the interaction and approached. "She talks about you," the coordinator said warmly. That moment in the lobby really touched her. "You should know you gave her a sense of safety that day." For the first time in a long while, the CEO smiled, not the polite smile he used for business meetings, but a genuine one. "Maybe I should come here more often," he said. And so he did. Over the next few weeks, he began visiting the community center every Friday. He joined the reading circle, helped with small activities, and even organized snacks for the children. He made sure to follow every rule, always in group settings, always with staff present, never crossing boundaries. He did not want to overstep, he simply wanted to be present, consistent, and kind. Each time, the little girl would be waiting for him with excitement. Sometimes she would tell him about school, sometimes about her favorite cartoons. She was never shy around him. And each time, he found himself listening with genuine interest. He discovered a warmth he had been missing, a human connection that went deeper than contracts or boardroom strategies. One evening, as he drove back home after volunteering, he realized something remarkable. For years, he had lived in a silent apartment, filled with expensive furniture but empty of laughter. Yet here, in a simple community room filled with children's chatter and crayons, he felt more alive than he had in decades. He understood now what the girl had asked him that first day was not just a childish question. It was a doorway. A doorway to family, to responsibility, to love. And without even planning it, he had stepped through it. That night, as he placed the child's drawing on his desk beside important business documents, he whispered to himself, "Maybe I wasn't meant to be only a CEO. Maybe I was meant to be more." And though he did not yet know how, he silently promised himself, he would keep showing up. For her. For her mother. For the possibility of a new chapter in his life that was no longer defined by loneliness, but by care. That evening, as the city lights blinked awake, the CEO sat at his wide desk, but instead of reviewing contracts and company reports, his eyes lingered on the little drawing the girl had given him. Two stick figures holding hands under the sun. It was simple, almost childlike nonsense to an outsider, but to him it was powerful. He had won awards, closed million-dollar deals, and seen his name printed in business magazines. Yet nothing had stirred his heart like that tiny drawing. The following Friday, he returned to the community center. He wasn't sure if the girl would be there, but he hoped she might be. When he stepped into the cheerful room filled with children, crayons, and the smell of juice boxes, her eyes found him instantly. She jumped up, waving her little bear in the air. "Mr. You came back," she shouted. This time, she didn't hesitate to run and hug his legs before the staff gently reminded her to stay with the group. He chuckled softly, kneeling to her level. "Of course, I came back. I promised myself I would." She grinned wide, and in that moment, he felt a piece of his old loneliness break away. Over the next few weeks, the bond grew stronger. Every Friday became his new ritual. He read books aloud, his usually firm and commanding voice now softened into warm tones as he turned the pages of children's stories. At first, he was awkward, stumbling over silly rhymes. But as he watched the children's eyes widen with imagination, he found himself laughing freely, something he hadn't done in years. The little girl always sat closest to him, leaning against his arm. Sometimes, she would whisper little things: what she had for lunch, which classmate made her laugh, or how she wanted to be a doctor like her mother when she grew up. These tiny conversations filled the empty spaces of his days. But it wasn't just the girl. Slowly, he started noticing the other children too. A boy who always seemed quiet until someone gave him crayons. A little girl who loved to sing but blushed when anyone clapped. A pair of brothers who fought over snacks but always made up with giggles. In their presence, he discovered something new. He had been so focused on profits and business growth that he had forgotten what it meant to simply share time with others without expecting anything in return. One afternoon, after story time, the community center coordinator approached him. "You know," she said, "you've become a favorite around here. The kids look forward to Fridays now because they know you'll be here." He smiled, almost shyly. "I didn't expect that. Honestly, I think I needed this more than they do." The coordinator nodded knowingly. Sometimes the giver receives just as much. That night, driving home, he thought about those words. It was true. Each Friday left him lighter, as though a part of his heavy armor had been peeled away. For years, he had thought that success meant keeping his guard up, never letting personal feelings slow him down. But with each drawing, each laugh, each hug from the children, especially that little girl, he realized that success could also mean opening his heart again. At his office, he began noticing the change too. His staff whispered that he seemed calmer, kinder, even approachable. Where once he might have barked orders in meetings, now he asked for ideas and listened. A junior employee even joked, "Sir, are you secretly taking happiness lessons?" He chuckled, not explaining, but deep inside he knew the truth. He had found those lessons in the company of a child who had asked him for something so impossible and yet so simple, to be a father figure. Still, questions lingered in his mind. Was he crossing a line? Was he imagining a role that wasn't his to take? He didn't want to make promises he couldn't keep. So, he chose to be careful. He followed all the center's guidelines. He never brought gifts without approval. He made sure everything he did was open, respectful, and safe. Then came the moment that changed everything. One Friday evening, as he was preparing to leave, the little girl tugged at his sleeve again, just like the first day. She looked up with her big eyes and whispered, "Mister, do you think you can keep coming? Not just sometimes, but forever." The words struck him like a quiet thunder. He didn't know what to say at first. But he knelt down, placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, and answered with the most honest words he could find. "I can't promise forever, little one. But I can promise I'll always try to be here when I can. I'll keep showing up for you." She thought for a moment, then smiled. "Okay. That's enough for me." In that moment, he understood something important: being a father wasn't just about titles or bloodlines. Sometimes, it was about presence. About showing up, again and again, in the small ways that mattered most. Weeks turned into months. He became not just a visitor, but a steady part of the center's routine. The girl's mother eventually noticed too. She came one evening to pick her daughter up, and she paused, watching from a distance as her little girl laughed freely beside the CEO. She approached him cautiously, unsure. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said softly. "My daughter talks about you every day. You've given her something I couldn't give while working these long hours, someone to listen to her, someone who makes her feel safe. For that, I am grateful." The CEO shook his head humbly. "She has given me more than I can ever give back. I was the one missing something, not her." The mother smiled, and for the first time, he saw trust in her eyes. That night, as he placed the girl's latest drawing on his desk, this time a picture of 3 stick figures under the sun, he realized something. It was no longer just the girl and him in the picture. She had added her mother too. They looked like a family, even if it wasn't official, even if it was just crayon lines. And for the first time in decades, the CEO allowed himself to believe, maybe he could have a family after all. Not by accident, not by wealth, but by choosing to care, to be present, and to open his heart. It had all started with one little question in a busy lobby. Now, it was becoming the answer to the emptiness of his life. The weeks of happiness and warmth at the community center brought a lightness into the CEO's life that everyone around him began to notice. But good things are often tested, and soon he faced challenges he hadn't expected. It began when a photo appeared online. Someone at the center had casually taken a picture of the reading circle, and in the background was the CEO, seated cross-legged on the carpet, holding a colorful children's book while the kids giggled around him. The photo spread quickly. Powerful CEO spends time at community center, and while many praised him for his kindness, others questioned his intentions. In the world of business and media, even good deeds could be twisted. His board of directors grew nervous. During a meeting, one of them said, "Sir, this might affect the company's image. Investors might not understand why our CEO is spending time in a daycare setting instead of focusing on growth strategies." Another added carefully, "There are rules about these things. If people misinterpret, it could harm your reputation." The CEO listened silently, but inside he felt a strong resistance. For the first time in years, he wasn't just living for stock charts or profits. He was living for something real, something that gave him peace. Still, he knew the board wasn't entirely wrong. People often judged what they didn't understand. He decided to be transparent. He met with the community center staff and asked about all the official guidelines. They explained clearly, volunteers were welcome, but there had to be boundaries. No personal gifts without approval, no private visits, and always group settings. He respected every rule. He wanted nothing but to bring joy and stability to the children, especially the little girl who had touched his heart. Yet the whispers continued. A few business journalists even speculated that he was trying to fix his image by pretending to be charitable. The CEO sighed at the irony. All his life, he had cared about appearances. Now, for once, he didn't, but the world was still watching with sharp eyes. One Friday evening, as he prepared to leave the center, the little girl noticed his worried face. She tugged at his sleeve and asked, "Mister, why do you look sad today?" He tried to smile. "Just busy thoughts, little one." She frowned, then placed her small bear in his hand. "Here. Bear makes me happy when I'm sad. You can borrow him until you feel better." His throat tightened. That simple act reminded him of what truly mattered. Not headlines. Not investors. But trust. The trust of a child who believed in him without conditions. Still, a larger test awaited him. The mother of the girl asked to speak with him privately one afternoon. She had been cautious around him, always polite but distant. Now she looked at him with both gratitude and concern. "You have done so much for my daughter," she said softly. "She talks about you every day. But I need to be sure, why are you doing this? What are you really looking for?" He took a deep breath. "I'm not looking for anything, ma'am. I lost something in my life a long time ago, something I thought I would never find again. Your daughter reminded me of it. She reminded me that there's more to life than money and power. I don't want to replace anyone or cross any boundaries. I just want to show up, as a friend, as someone she can count on." The mother studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "She sees you as family. I don't want her heart to break if you ever disappear." Her words stayed with him. That night, he thought deeply. Could he promise permanence? Could he be there, not just as a visitor, but as someone who consistently remained in her life? He wasn't sure how, but he knew he wanted to try. When the board raised the issue again, he stood tall and spoke with rare emotion. "This is not about image. This is about responsibility. If this company is strong, it should stand for more than profit. We will set up a formal volunteer program, fund extra childcare services, and make it clear, this is not for publicity. This is for community." To his surprise, some board members agreed. Others were hesitant, but they couldn't deny the sincerity in his voice. In the end, the program was approved. His company would officially support the center and provide scholarships for working families. The news spread again, but this time it was harder to twist. People saw results: children with better resources, mothers with reliable childcare, families with less worry. Through it all, the little girl kept watching him with her bright eyes. She didn't care about newspapers or boardrooms. She only cared that every Friday, he was there reading stories, laughing, listening. And for him, that was enough. As he left the center one evening, the girl ran up to him, holding his borrowed bear. "You can keep Bear for longer," she said. "Because you still look like you need him." He laughed, kneeling to hug her carefully. "Maybe I do. Thank you, little one." In that simple hug, in that simple gift of a toy, he found more strength than any business victory had ever given him. The challenges were real, the doubts would come again, but he had made his choice. He would not step back. He would stand by this child and her mother, not as a savior, not as a hero, but as someone who kept showing up, again and again. And though he didn't yet know what the future held, he felt certain of one thing: his life was no longer just his own. The day of the official celebration finally came. The community center had arranged a small but lively event to thank the company for funding new child care scholarships. Parents, children, volunteers, and even local officials gathered in the brightly decorated hall. Colorful balloons floated near the ceiling, and the smell of fresh pastries and tea filled the air. The CEO, usually uncomfortable at such social events, stood quietly near the back, not wanting the spotlight. For him, the joy was not in being thanked but in watching the children play freely, without the weight of their parents' struggles showing in their eyes. He spotted the little girl almost immediately. She was wearing a neat blue dress, her hair tied into two small braids. When her eyes met his, her whole face lit up. Without hesitation, she rushed across the hall and wrapped her arms tightly around his waist. "You came," she said happily, as if she had doubted for a moment he might not. He bent down and answered gently, "I told you, I'll always try to show up." Her mother, standing nearby, watched the scene. This time there was no hesitation in her expression, only quiet gratitude. She approached and said softly, "You've done more for us than I can ever repay. My daughter feels safe again. For that, I thank you from the bottom of my heart." The event continued with speeches and clapping, but the CEO barely noticed. What mattered most came afterward, when the little girl pulled him aside and looked up at him with complete seriousness. "I know you can't be my daddy for real," she said slowly, as if she had thought hard about it, "but can you be in our family forever?" The man felt his eyes grow wet. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "Family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about love, care, and showing up. If you and your mama will have me, then yes, I'll be in your family forever." The girl squealed in delight and hugged him tightly, and her mother, standing a few steps away, gave him a nod filled with trust. For the first time in many years, the CEO felt he was exactly where he was meant to be, not in a boardroom, not behind a desk, but standing beside a little girl and her mother, who now felt like home. From that day onward, his role was clear. He became an official mentor through the center, with all the proper forms and agreements signed. But more than that, he became like a godfather figure in the girl's life. He attended her school events when her mother's shifts kept her late. He cheered for her at the small talent shows the children put together at the center. And every Friday, without fail, he kept his promise and showed up for story time, his once lonely voice now full of laughter as he read aloud to eager little faces. His company, too, began to change. Inspired by his commitment, employees signed up for the volunteer program. Soon, Fridays weren't just his visits, there were groups of workers helping with activities, tutoring, and even organizing field trips. What began as one man's personal bond turned into a movement that brought genuine change. Months passed, and the CEO's life looked different. His home was no longer a cold apartment filled with silence. It now had children's drawings taped to the refrigerator, laughter echoing from weekend visits, and warm dinners shared with the girl and her mother when schedules allowed. On one such evening, as they finished a simple meal together, the little girl leaned against him sleepily and whispered, "You're the best promise I ever had." Those words, more than any deal he had ever signed, felt like his greatest achievement. He had spent decades chasing numbers, wealth, and recognition. Yet what gave his life true meaning came from a child who had once tugged his sleeve in a busy lobby and asked him the most unexpected question of all, "Can you be my daddy forever?" He couldn't give her that exact answer, but he gave her something even stronger, a promise to never walk away, to always show up, and to be the family she needed in the truest sense of the word. And in doing so, he discovered that he had healed his own loneliness too. The final image was simple yet powerful: a man who once believed he had everything, now sitting cross-legged on the floor of the community center, surrounded by children, with the little girl leaning comfortably on his shoulder. He read aloud from a picture book, his voice calm and warm. The sound of laughter and hope filled the room, and for the first time in a very long time, his life felt complete.